There has been a terrible murder. Poor Colonel Mustard has been found dead, murdered in cold blood, and we are going to use circular questioning to solve the mystery and make sure justice is served. Because that is therapeutic. I'm going to show you how we can use circular questioning to get deeper answers, solve a murder, but also how these questions are an intervention that you can use in therapy with anyone, not just families, not just couples, but individual clients too. If you don't know me, my name is Oliver and I'm a family systems therapist and a clinical director out here in Los Angeles, and I love thinking and working systemically. If you find these videos helpful, I will gladly keep them coming, but you have to tell me, you have to let me know with comments or follows or likes or shares, whatever it is. And quick side note, thank you so much if you've left me a comment. Honestly, they really make my day. Systemic therapy holds the view that all actions, whether they are active behaviors or passive inactions, carry meaning and contribute to the ongoing narrative of our relationships. If you're like me, you might have had to listen to that 8 times before it makes sense. So here's an example that will make it clearer. Hopefully, it definitely did to me. Think back to school or group supervision and imagine/remember that one person that is always late. Systemically, we don't see that person being late as a series of independent events. It's viewed as a pattern of behaviors, and that behavior contains a communication. And that communication, as well as the behaviors, can influence other people. So if Miss Scarlett, for example, habitually arrives late to these fabulous dinner parties, her tardiness isn't an accident. It's a pattern that is laden with significance, repercussions, maybe some consequences. So Colonel Mustard, God rest his soul, is/was a stickler for punctuality. And he would let Miss Scarlett know how annoyed he was to be interrupted at dinner by her lateness, and he would do it loudly and publicly.
Why are you always so bloody late?
His reaction to her being late might actually have heightened her anxiety, creating a sort of self-fulfilling cycle where she got so anxious about being told off she forgot things, and then she'd have to go back home and found herself running late. If that's not a motive for murder, I don't know what is. Circular questioning is a tool that therapists use to map out patterns of communication and interactions just like that, and especially the patterns that might be playing a role in the client's difficulties. Circular questioning will help you and help the family learn how their interactions impact each other, and you can then make changes in those interactions. If we could have told Colonel Mustard to find a healthier way of talking to Miss Scarlett, that would have been great, because that would have maybe lowered her anxiety and that might have helped her be on time more. So in this video, I'm going to show you how circular questioning can make an impact on anyone, even if it's just you and one other person in the room. There's 3 or 4 different sections to circular questioning, and the first is all about defining the problem. You're simply going to start by asking your client to tell you about the problem as they see it. So you might get an answer like, I'm shy, or I think I'm depressed. So these are totally fine answers, but perhaps they're a bit one-dimensional. We know as therapists that there's a whole lot more to depression and social anxiety, but we cannot assume that the client does too. Circular questioning allows us to ask follow-up questions that make the clients dig just a little bit deeper for answers. And in doing so, in just asking the questions, we're actually encouraging insight and self-reflection and systemic thinking. Can you tell me, why is being shy a problem for you? What does it impact? What impact does it have on you and your friends in your life? So to answer those questions, you kind of actually have to dig deep to start answering them. So that's the intervention, right? Sometimes people find it hard to explain what the problem is. And when that happens, you get to switch gears and you can ask a different type of question, something like, if you could wave a magic wand and change something about your situation, what would it be? This helps the client get clearer about the problem by imagining life without it, so they can work backwards and tell you what the problem is. It also starts to point towards what they want instead of the problem. That kind of questioning is an intervention in itself, because in order to get the answer, you really have to expand and think and imagine yourself in the future and in the past. Let's go back to our murder mystery. Miss Scarlett, why do you think you were invited here tonight?
Well, I assumed it was for the usual social pleasantries, but now, with the night taking such a grim turn, I can't help but wonder if there was a more calculated reason for my presence. Perhaps someone wanted me as part of their alibi.
So that's a decent starter question that gets her thinking about motives and who and why and how she's involved in the murder of Colonel Mustard. Question to Professor Plum. If you could change one thing or one action you performed this evening, what would it be?
In hindsight, I regret isolating myself in the library, but now I realize it also made me a convenient suspect. If I could change one thing, I'd have stayed in the view of the others.
Professor Plum knows he looks guilty, and this question helps us understand a little bit more about where he was and what he was doing and why. Mrs. Peacock, considering the evening's unfortunate turn, what do you imagine happened and why?
It's all very distressing, but I sensed an undercurrent of tension as soon as I came in, but it's not my place to point fingers or stir the pot, so I kept it to myself.
Any guesses as to who done it yet? Leave your answers in the comments below. You can also let me know what topics you want me to cover in the future. I'm really good with family systems and psychoanalytic theory. If you want more on circular questioning, you should know that there's a bunch of other free videos somewhere on YouTube, and there's a whole course on circular questioning on My People Patterns. You get a detailed video and a stack of circular questions that you can print off, and I still take those questions with me into intake sessions. After we get clear on the problem, we can go even deeper, because unfortunately, people don't come to therapy with an accurate analysis of what's wrong as it relates to interactions in relationships. So we have to ask more to understand the situation fully. I actually make a joke about this and sometimes ask, if you were in the Big Brother house, what would I see on the cameras? What would you show me that says I'm shy? Or you could say, what exactly do you do when you're in a group of people and feeling I can get away with the Big Brother one? This helps us understand the specific actions and reactions of the people and our client, and it's really much more useful for helping them. We could also ask comparison questions about the past or the future to get the gears turning there too. Have you always been shy? When did it change? When was the first time you remember feeling socially anxious? What was it like before then? What changed? What happened? What was going on when it did change? If you could go to a party and not be shy, what would that look like? What would be different? What would be different about you? What would be different about other people? So the idea there is that we're turning a snapshot of I am shy into a movie. The whole story becomes a bit clearer with the before and now and an imagined future. It really helps turn vague ideas into more concrete examples, gives us a lot more fuel for future conversation or goals or treatment plans. Here's an example of a question that could be asked to a client who is shy or dealing with social anxiety. Could you tell me about a recent time where you felt shy or anxious in a social setting? What specific thoughts went through your mind right before you went into the room, or the day before, or the moments before? How did you feel it in your body when you were in the room? Well, before I walked into the party last week, I felt this wave of nervousness come over me, like everybody was going to turn around and look at me and judge me. Okay, so with that answer and question, you get a good before picture. That's so much good information. There's a lot of anticipation, fantasies that people are going to judge this person. There's a lot to work on there. All right, Watson, let's get back to our murder mystery. Miss Scarlett, how has your experience tonight differed from previous gatherings at this fabulous mansion?
Colonel Mustard was the same, nagging me about being late. Maybe Professor Plum looked a bit more tense than usual. Oh, and I saw Mrs. Peacock near there, looking rather flustered, which is not like her.
With these questions, we got Miss Scarlett to compare the current event with past experiences, and she was able to focus on interactions and behaviours that stood out or didn't. And I think her answers kind of reveal that there's something going on in the atmosphere. Mrs. Peacock was weird, Professor Plum was weird. All of this she's noticing thanks to our questions. So in therapy, that's a bit like identifying changes in patterns of behavior that may signal a shift in the client's life or relationships. Like, I don't know, my partner was mad at me when he got home. Well, that does change everything. Professor Plum, reflecting on the evening, can you identify any changes in the usual social dynamics, especially any that struck you as out of place or significant in the lead up to the discovery of the dead body of Colonel Mustard?
Tonight was a bit different. The interactions were strained. People were whispering. Just before the incident, I saw Colonel Mustard rushing towards the conservatory in quite a state.
All right, so Professor Plum's response to that question about social dynamics and changes gives us some insight into the relationships that were going on right before the murder. He observed Colonel Mustard's behaviors, which suggests there might be more to the story than we know. In therapy, understanding shifts in behaviors around people, around our clients, help us hypothesize about relationship tensions and how they might be contributing to our clients' issues. Mrs. Peacock, considering the events of tonight, how would you compare your interactions with other guests to past encounters? What stood out to you as unusual or unexpected?
I suppose I am usually quite reserved, and I was even more so tonight. Something was brewing. I do recall noticing the candlestick being out of place earlier, but no, nothing really.
So with these questions, Mrs. Peacock is noticing that she felt different, something was off, but she's also got associations that are sometimes helpful to us. That gives us more information too. If you've not hit follow or subscribe or left a comment, please do so now. It's a form of feedback that lets me know that I should keep on making these videos. I also take requests, so feel free to ask for a video on a specific topic, family systems, whatever you want. I will try and make it if I can. So the next area to explore is the individual's theories in relationship to the problem. We want to know what they imagine. And the goal there is to help the client see the connection between their own beliefs about their problems and how their beliefs affect their interaction with other people, which often keep things going. So we might ask a client to consider the perspective of other partygoers who might see their shyness as being aloof or distant. So back to my Big Brother TV show idea, I might ask, what would I see when you walked in to this party? How would I explain other people's reactions to this? Could lead to a revelation that while the client is trying to protect themselves from judgment, we might find out that other people might actually be interested in engaging with them, but they're put off by what they perceive as frostiness or aloofness. Now that we know what our clients' theories are about why they are the way that they are, we can use some more circular questioning to start making some changes. I know, just by asking questions. So our role is not to convince the client to change their beliefs, but rather to offer alternative descriptions, perspectives, and alternative beliefs that are relevant to the problem. This is often in the form of a positive connotation, which means you're putting a spin on the symptom or the problematic behavior. So if the client sees themselves as shy, I might suggest that, oh, maybe you're just very respectful or maybe polite. And then I might ask, when did you learn to be so polite or so respectful? It might sound like this. Let's imagine for a moment that your shyness is actually a form of you being wonderfully polite. When did you decide that you had to be polite all the time? So this is a reframe, it's a positive connotation. It sheds light on things, it makes them think about the problem in a different way. We're introducing new information into the system, suggesting alternative ways of thinking about the problem, and maybe, hopefully, changing their perspective on their own problem. Another layer to this is hypothetical questions. So we might start exploring how life would be different without the problem or the interactions that are contributing to the problem. Are there times when it's okay not to be polite? In 5 years from now, are you going to still be so polite? So here's an important point. You do not have to wait for the answers or clarify what you mean. Just asking the question is enough. You're planting seeds here. And because it's a hypothetical question, the answer's not particularly relevant. Sometimes it's interesting. If your client gets stuck, don't get hung up on explaining it to them. Just move on. All right, so Professor Plum, when you noticed the unusual behavior of Colonel Mustard, what went through your mind?
My theory is that Mustard has always had a bit of a temper and perhaps he had a confrontation in the conservatory. It's unlike him to leave a social gathering so abruptly without a good reason.
So this question encourages Professor Plum to articulate his own hypothesis about Colonel Mustard's behaviour, which can reveal a lot of things that we don't know as therapists or detectives. In therapy, it would be like exploring the client's interpretations of other people's actions, and especially the actions that influence their own problem behaviours or emotional responses. So it would be like the client saying, so when I walk into a room and people look at me, they are absolutely judging me. Well, maybe, but it could also be that you just walked into the room and it's just what people do. All right, Miss Scarlett, imagine a scenario where the tension of tonight's events was absent. How might your interactions with other people have been different?
If the air hadn't been so thick with unease, I would have been my usual self, mingling, laughing, the life of the party. Instead, I lurked in the shadows all night. I suppose that's the only reason I saw Mrs. Peacock look so flustered. She's usually so composed even when the spotlight is on her.
Miss Scarlett's answer to the hypothetical scenario reveals her awareness of the atmosphere and how her behaviours changed. But also she reflects on what was different, what she saw as being different, what she observed because of her behavioural changes. And let's get to Mrs. Peacock. So if your usual calm demeanour was replaced by a more assertive one, how do you think that would have affected the evening?
I pride myself on maintaining composure, but I suppose if I were to be more forthright with my feelings, they might not build up until they erupt. I would have been more vocal about my fears and unease and warned everyone.
This question is inviting Mrs. Peacock to consider how a change in her usual behaviour could have altered everything else. You get a lot more information there. Okay, so before I reveal who the murderer is, let's just review that we've seen that circular questioning is an intervention in itself. It can really help shift thinking and perspectives, even if it's just you and the client in the room. There is a handout to this video coming your way, I promise. If the link isn't below when you're watching this, come back again to see if it's there soon. I'm sorry. And I suppose you want to know who the murderer is. Well, the answer is going to be in the PDF. Sorry, I've not finished it yet. And if you have feelings about that, you can tell me about those in the comments. On a serious note, please hit follow and subscribe. Leave me a comment, and I would love to hear from you. It is a form of feedback that lets me know that you want more of these videos, and I will keep on making them as long as the demand is there.